My name is Riggs, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Riggs.
Truthfully, it's Michael, but there was a whole bunch of Michaels at my home group at the time, and my sponsor said I should find a way to be identified so people could find me later when they actually wanted my help, which I did not believe was actually going to happen, but it did. He was right. As with many things, he was right. So my sobriety date is April 1st, 2013. Makes it April Fool's Day. Doesn't make my sobriety a joke. It just means it's the day that my sponsor and I picked. Well, he did, and I didn't argue. I stopped drinking somewhere in March, but I wasn't sure of the date. So he's like, well, just make it April 1st. And I was like, okay. I didn't argue with him. I would argue with a lot of other things later with him. My home group is change agents. We meet Sundays and Thursdays in the parking lot of Westover United Methodist as opposed to inside the building. So it was really nice to have a styrofoam cup of coffee, that my toes aren't cold, not sitting in a camping chair. So there's a lot of good things that you guys have that we don't. But we do have a meeting, and I can tell you the good part about AA I've learned through this whole COVID experience is you don't need walls, you don't need coffee, you don't need pastries, you just need a group of alcoholics and the guidance from the first 164 pages to have a really good meeting. So we meet rain, sleet, or snow. So if you're in Raleigh and you'd like to come, we'd like to have you. So I guess I'll tell you what it was like, what happened, what it's like today. To start with what it was like most alcoholics, I didn't feel like I kind of belonged in most things that I was involved in. I kind of always was a little bit moody, depressed, anxious, worried about what you thought about me. But the good news is that I'm a very adaptable person to the social environment that I'm in, so I made sure I fit in with whatever group I was around. So I was able to socially chameleon into different groups of people so that I looked like I belonged, that you would hopefully make me feel like I belonged. But secretly, at some point, I always was worried that, you weren't going to call me back, you weren't going to invite me to your party, I wasn't going to be a part of your group of people, that you didn't really like me, that you said you liked me. Especially if you were a woman, that was a really hard thing for me to deal with because my mom, my biological mother, she disappeared when I was 11 or 12. She just kind of stopped showing up. It's a longer story, but that kind of set me on this tangent with women. It's like a separate sidebar problem altogether. But anyway, I got drunk the first time when I was 15 with my dad on root beer schnapps, which is actually tastes better than you think. And I didn't know I was drunk until I stood up. We were camping in the Keys in Florida, and I stood up, and all the schnapps rushed into my body, and I was like, wow, there's a feeling on the inside that I have been wanting so bad in here and in here that I had never had, and I felt it. I felt happy. I didn't worry about what you thought. I didn't care about anything other than the feeling that I had, and I wanted to ride it like an ocean wave forever. And from then on out, I had resolved that alcohol was a friend and that it would make things better. And I tried to chase it, and I chased other substances, but the majority of my checkered past is alcohol. That was the solution. Obviously, being 15, it wasn't easy to get a hold of, but when I did and I could, I would, whether it was Mad Dog 2020 or whatever it was you had, I would drink as much of it as I could. And the good part was I got a cast iron stomach, and so I didn't throw up a lot, so there was even little back-end bad experience with alcohol for me. There was just really great. It was a solution. It worked. It was effective. It was a cure. Things disappeared. All the problems disappeared. By the time I was 19, because I was such a good social chameleon, I fell into a group of a lot of older people. By older, I mean just old enough that they could go to bars so that I could go to the bar with them. So by the time I was 19, I was a regular at a bar. So I graduated from Jack and Coke to Jack and Seven till I met an older guy, and he was like, son, all that sugar's giving you a headache. That's why you got them hangovers. He was like, just get to Jack and Water. And I was like, okay. So I got to Jack and Water, which really just means I arrive at drunk sooner. But I have very little repercussions from alcohol, so it's great. Nothing's bad. And I've told people that I sponsor, and I tell people this, if I could capture my 20s with drinking, I would never stop because it didn't hurt. I mean, it did hurt people, but I didn't know it. But it didn't hurt me. And so that was why it was effective. Like, I felt no pain. No DUI, no back of cop car. Some strained relationships, but mostly those were people that were too judgy anyways, my parents and stuff like that. So I didn't really care. My dad would tell me, he was like, man, you fall into the shit and come out smelling like a rose more often than anybody I know. I mean, he picked me up from police stations where they didn't drug test me and they didn't roadside test. And he was like, God, I can smell it. He's like, how come they didn't test you? I was like, I don't know. Wrecked cars, things like that, no big deal. Somewhere along the line, I catch my first DUI. I think I was like 24, maybe 25. But I attribute it to having to get the cigarettes. That's why my car swerved. So had I not swerved, the cop wouldn't have pulled me over, so he wouldn't have sobriety tested me, and so I wouldn't have got a DUI. Never mind the fact that I blow a .12, that I'm beyond the legal drunk limit. I just figure it's a circumstance situation, and that's the only reason why I've got this DUI, because I'm a good drunk driver. Well, I think I am. So I have to go to some AA class thing, which turns out that I can't actually make it there on time. And if you don't make it on time, they lock the door. So I have to repeat it because I missed the second day because the night before I end up getting drunk and I can't get up that early. But that doesn't bother me. I think I got a little community service, no big deal. At this point, drinking is really a problem. I'm not really allowed to come back to my parents' house. Then the last time I move out, they tell me I can't move back in ever again. I figured, I don't really need to live with you people anyways, because all you're trying to do is control what I need to, what you want me to do, and that doesn't really work for me. So I'm okay with that. Like, I'm okay with the separation in that relationship. It doesn't bother me because I've found what makes me feel better at the end of every single day. So I'm okay. I find a woman, we get engaged. But with most women, I realize that I use my mom disappearing as this tool to get her to love me and to care for me. It eventually gets too expensive for her, so she decides that we're not going to be together anymore. Through a long story, I go back to get the engagement ring. She won't give it to me. It turns out you're not allowed to kick people's windows open and come in their house to try and get your thing back. And so I get a felony. And that felony, I spend 2 weeks in jail for criminal trespassing. She doesn't press charges. My sister bails me out. So I'm like, this is good. I'm going to get out of jail. I'm not going to drink anymore. I got to stop. I'm not going to do any more drugs because people with drugs go to jail. So that's another resolution. I'm going to go back to college. I'm going to get a degree because I got to get a better job. That's another thing I got to do. I'm not going to smoke cigarettes anymore. That's another thing I got to do. So I got my list after 2 weeks in jail. By the time I get out of jail, I got to pack a Newports, and I'm drunk watching the sunset. And I just say to myself, well, I'm going to start tomorrow. And I didn't start tomorrow. Like, what I did was I just started drinking all over again. It all just went right back to normal. I move around a few times, get kicked out of a few different places, land back in my parents' house in Detroit, get kicked out of there again. Nothing changes for me. Like, I don't associate any of the costs on relationships. And I don't realize that I've become very transactional with everybody that I interact with. Like, if you can't give me anything more, I don't need you anymore. So I stop talking to people that won't give me things. I change jobs because they're not taking care of me anymore. They're not giving me what I think I deserve. So I just quit places and go to the next place because they don't know how good they got me and they're trying to get me over. So I'm just going to quit this place and I'm going to go to this next place. And so, like, that's all of my relationships, whether it's work or family or fun. If you don't have it and you can't give it, then I don't need you. And I just drop. I drop whoever it is. Brothers, mom, dad, job, whatever. But I meet my wife. I was about 28 when I met her. She doesn't do drugs. She doesn't smoke. She hates hangovers. And I think, this is it. This is the woman I need. She's going to get me to clean up. She's going to draw a line in the sand, and she's going to tell me you got to quit doing all this crazy partying, and I'm going to do it for her. That's what I'm going to do. But I told you I'm transactional. So when we get married, we have to agree on how many nights I'll come home, because that's what it turns into. It turns into she's standing there with my 6-month-old daughter, and I'm arguing that I need nights away from home or a night to go out and party with the boys because I got to blow off steam. So we make an agreement that I will stay at home at least 3 nights a week and I won't go out and party. That's what it turned into with her. I mean, she's literally holding my daughter, and I could tell you this is a disgusting memory to have, but I know it. And I remember thinking that was a victory, because there's only 3 nights out of this week I got to stay at home. So that turns into she can watch my drinking a lot more, and now I've got this last person who, for some reason, every day says I love you and stays voluntarily, and I'm lying and hiding from her. We lived in Michigan. Michigan has this, you get 10 cents for cans. So I had to do all the recycling in the house because she figured out how many beers I was drinking. Turns out I do all the trash, because anytime I throw a bottle in there, she's like, there's like 2 bottles of Jameson in the trash can. How much are you drinking? So now I have to take all the trash out because I can't let her see that. I start hiding drinks in the garage. I vividly remember one morning she woke up and she was like, there's a shot glass on the counter. She was like, were you drinking shots by yourself? And I was like, fuck. So what do I think? I'll just drink straight from the bottle. No more shot glasses. That's what I have to do. So now when she wakes up in the morning, the only thing that she ever finds on the counter is maybe one dirty glass. She doesn't find empty bottles anymore. She doesn't find empty cans anymore. She doesn't find shot glasses anymore. But I'm getting blackout drunk on a regular basis. That's it. Whether I'm at home on those agreed upon nights or I'm going out for the night, I'm getting blackout drunk, period. It's going to happen. Doesn't matter. There's talks and conversations about how I smell, and then no big deal. Needless to say, I get a second DUI. Second DUI I get is not close to home. It's at a casino, an Indian casino. Doesn't really matter about that whole point, because the reason why I tell you that story is when I come home, it's another one of those get out of jail. Not going to drink anymore. I can't do this. This is too expensive. As soon as I come home, all of not ours, it was all mine. There's a box on the table. It's got all the bottles of wine and whiskey and glasses and beer mugs, and it's all in the box. And she's like, we got to give this stuff away. You got to quit drinking. I was like, you're right. I do. I got to quit drinking. Absolutely. For sure. Lawyer tells me I should go to AA meetings, get a sheet signed. I'm going to have to do that too, because I can't afford to go to jail for this one. Bear in mind, I've already been to jail for a felony. I've already been to jail for DUI and a bunch of other stuff, but I can't afford this. So I give all my liquor stuff to one of my buddies because he'll keep it safe. Because in my mind is, I'm coming back for that box. It's just a matter of when she says I can, I'm coming back for the box. But for right now, I need to quit drinking. So I go to some AA meetings, actually. So this was about 10 years ago. A little more than 10 probably, but I go to some AA meetings. I go to a couple of them, and I sit in the meeting, and I read the steps, and I listen to what everybody talks about, and the only thing I hear is men that are divorced, women that got beat up, guys that don't got a car anymore, women that are raising all their kids, and I'm like, I'm not one of these people, man. I don't have any of these problems that these people have. Like, she's still with me. I got a nice Chrysler 300 out there. I got a roof over my head. Like, I'm not an alcoholic. So then 2 meetings sober, next meeting I drink before I go to the meeting because it might be slightly more entertaining. And then I realized that AA is anonymous. You can put any name on the sheet. So I just don't even go. What I decide to do is I drive around drinking. I fill out a sheet with some fake name because that's all I'm going to do is hand it to a judge anyways. He's not going to check me. How's he going to prove it? So I fill it out with a fake name. I come home super late because I'm drunk, but Ryan thinks I'm at an AA meeting. And so that's how I do that for a little while. I go back to my buddy's house, start drinking there because he's got all my stuff, and I just hide it from her. So now there's zero honesty in my life now. The one person left that thinks I might be honest doesn't even know. We go through this for the next several years where she catches me. I tell her I'm going to stop. She catches me. I tell her I'm going to stop. I end up having to spend some weekends at my parents' house because she asked me to leave the house for a while. Doesn't bother me. I remember one time vividly calling my dad and saying, man, she caught me and I know I got to stop. And my dad said, he goes, you're just a fucking liar. He was like, you're a liar and a drunk. He was like, if you just stop lying and stop drinking, he goes, all of your problems would go away. He goes, if you don't want to do that, he goes, just take your stuff, take the dog, and leave. He goes, I'll raise your kids. I'll take care of your wife. He's like, because clearly, he's like, you can't stop lying, and you can't stop drinking. I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to stop. 2009, we moved from Michigan to North Carolina because of the recession. Come down here. I believe in my mind, the new lie I tell myself is when I come to North Carolina, I'll change. It'll be different because it's a new place. I'll reinvent myself. And my dad tells me, he says, son, he goes, no matter where you go, there you are. If you don't change you, he goes, you're just going to be a drunk liar in North Carolina. He says, you're a drunk liar here, you can be a drunk liar there. He goes, so until you stop lying, until you stop drinking, he goes, it doesn't matter where you go. But what it does turn into is I come down to North Carolina and I don't drink, but I have no solution. I have no help. I reach out to no one. I don't do anything different. And I become a very miserable, angry, irritable, depressed person. And Ryan's getting fed up. I'm getting fed up. I hate North Carolina. I hate the heat. I hate how it's always green all the time. I hate everything. There's a nickname in my family that I got called through these years, which was Grumple Dump. It's a poem by Shel Silverstein, where the Grumple Dump says, this mud's too muddy, this dirt's too dirty, this water's too wet. That's the nickname in my family that I get called behind my back. It's funny today. You can laugh, but it was not funny when they told me. I was really mad. But one of my buddies from Michigan comes down to visit, and it's good because I get to drink again because we go away for the weekend, he and I. So he keeps visiting. I keep going on some benders, which means I get to go drinking for 2 or 3 days and then got to clean up for a couple weeks. Then my buddy comes back down and I get to drink again. So that works for a little while. I only tell you that because the last night I drank, and this is how I can prove that I know I'm an alcoholic, is, again, I know something's bad, and I tell myself, I'm like, I can't drink tonight. We're gonna go watch the fight. I'm going to have sweet tea. I'm going to have nachos and watch this fight with him. So I meet him at Tyler's Tap Room. It's a good idea, right? I sit down, I order my sweet tea, I order my nachos. My buddy Herb's sitting here. He's having a beer. I'm no big deal. But I realize that I got eagle eyes, and I'm like watching everybody drink. I can't stop doing it. Like, I just see everyone's glass that sweats and doesn't sweat, and if they manage to finish it, like, it just becomes this weird thing that's happening. Herb tells me this one tastes good. Nah, I'm good, bro. Can I get more sweet tea? He's like, this one tastes like chocolate. And I was like, what? He goes, dude, I'm telling you, this beer is 18 proof. He goes, and it tastes like chocolate. I was like, get the hell out of here. I was like, let me try it. I was like, can I get that and a shot of Jameson? And that's it. I don't remember. I do remember we left the bar. We went to the gas station and got more beer. I remember that. I remember walking up the front door and thinking, all right, it's time to steady out the walking. It's time to stop the giggling like a school kid. It's time to go in the door real serious and quiet like a ninja and fall asleep on the couch. Like, that's what I need to do. But I can't do it. I'm too drunk. So I stumble in the door. Ryan comes around the corner. She looks at me. I look at her. And I was like, oh, that's it. What's up? She knows. I know. Next morning, she tells me I need to do something or leave. So I come to AA for the second time. I go to a couple meetings. No, I don't go to a couple. I go to one a week for about a month, a little over a month. And I go to Cary Young People, which meets at the TAC in Cary. And I meet a couple of people. And at Cary Young People, at the time, and I'm sure still to this day, because it's a good meeting, is there's a bunch of people that won't let you leave. They keep cornering you, and they keep telling you all these crazy stories about how their wives kicked them out and they had restraining orders, but now their lives are put back together. But all I hear is this crazy story. Like, my first sponsor tells me how he got kicked out of his house. His wife pulls a knife on him, how he had a restraining order. She changed the locks, and he's like, and now I'm back in the house. And I'm just like, dude, why would you tell people this stuff? Like, that's the kind of stuff you don't talk about. Like, that's not, there's no bragging rights in there. Like, I don't understand the genuine honesty of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I haven't lived in genuine honesty for 37 years with anybody. I mean, I've been honest with people, but it's only to get something. So I tell you the sob story about how my mom left me because I want you to care for me. I tell you the sob story about how my mom left me because I need you to understand why I'm so sad and I'm so depressed so that you'll fall in love with me. Like, that's the things that I do. I tell you the sob story about why I drink too much is because I'm having a hard time. Like, that's what I do. So I'm not genuinely honest like the people in Alcoholics Anonymous are. But Gary keeps coming after me. And for some reason, I liked that meeting. I don't know why. It just felt good. And I'm sure that it has a lot more to do with God than it has a lot to do with me. Because the next time I go to that meeting where I hide by the soda machine, Gary asked me if I'm waiting for a sponsor to fall out of the sky. And I thought that was not funny. And I didn't like being challenged by another man. So I was like, well, why don't you sponsor me? And he was like, all right, cool. He's like, call me. And I didn't like that idea because I didn't have his number. Well, no, actually I did. The funny story was, at Care Young People, everybody tried to give you their phone number, and I would be like, oh yeah, I'll put it in my phone. And I would not put it in my phone. I would just be like, yeah, I got it. I got you. Call you. But Gary was standing there, and he was like, no, put it in Gary Rudd. You can put my last name, Rudd. He was like willing to give his last name out. He was like, now text me. And I was like, oh, fudge. So he was the only phone number I actually had in AA, by the way, because he watched me do it and he made me text him. So anyway, call Gary. Gary says, we're going to meet after. He goes, we'll meet after Care Young People on Wednesday. I was like, well, I go on Saturday. He goes, well, come Wednesday too. And he's like, we'll meet after Wednesday. And I was like, well, okay, fine. So I go and we come meet him after the meeting. We sit down and he says, are you willing to do whatever it takes to stay sober? And I said, well, what does that mean? He goes, well, it just means you got to work the 12 steps. I said, well, okay, I can do that. He goes, we'll just work the 12 steps. I'll be here with you. We're going to read the book together. He's like, you should go to a meeting every day. And I said, well, man, I'm a really busy dude. I'm working as a manager at Walmart. I'm going to school online. And he goes, well, yeah, you can get to 6 meetings a week at least. And I was like, God, I'm really busy. I don't have a lot of time. He was like, no, there's last call at 10 o'clock. You can come at 10 o'clock. He goes, there's morning meditation. You can go there at 6 a.m. before you go to work. And I was like, what? And he's like, do you have a home group? And I was like, well, what is that? So, like, I don't know anything about AA. I've been in AA for 45 days at this point. I have no idea what a home group is. He has to explain that to me. What a service position is. He has to explain that to me. How I should get other people's phone numbers so that I can talk to them about what's going on and be honest with people, not call guys to talk about football or baseball or politics, but to actually tell them what I'm thinking and what I'm struggling with. How I should get to the meeting early, not hide in my car smoking cigarettes. How I should probably stay a little bit later to make sure the place actually gets cleaned up because there's a meeting right after ours and they deserve a clean place just like we had. He explains to me a whole bunch of things that I did not realize went into how AA worked. And I come home and I tell Ryan, I was like, man, I got to do this. I got to go to 6 meetings. I got to call guys. I got to get a home group. I was like, there's a whole bunch of stuff to do. And she was like, good. Bear in mind, she doesn't really talk to me right now because I find out she's debating on moving out. She's actually apartment shopping. She is enrolling in college because she's developing Plan B. And Plan B is no rigs. Plan B is Ryan, single mom, 2 kids, has to raise them the rest of their lives because I can't seem to get it right. I didn't find that out until I was about 6 months sober, by the way. But she's working Plan B with her mother's help. Not in a bad way. Her mother didn't hate me. But she's formulating and taking action to have to do this deal without me. Because I've proven I'm an incompetent human being, like on all forms. I can't be a dad. I can't be a son. I can't be a husband. I can't be a friend. I can't even really be a good employee, which is the one thing I thought I did really well. Meeting with Gary, he tells me that he's like, it's going to be God and sobriety, then your family. He goes, then maybe some other stuff. He goes, and work's going to be at the bottom. And I was like, well, dude, if I work real well and I make good money, then everything gets taken care of. He was like, no, it doesn't. And he explains to me that I got to have the pyramid, he calls it, has to be flipped upside down. He's like, because you've never thought about forming a relationship with God. He goes, and that's going to need to be your number one priority. And he explains to me why I need to pray. that I need to at least, at the bare minimum, ask God to keep me sober in the morning on my knees, and at the bare minimum, thank God for keeping me sober at the end of every day. So I agreed to that idea. I was raised Christian, but I have huge objections to the church at this point in time. I hate organized religion. But he just is like, just God. He goes, just keep it simple. So that's fine. So I start doing that. I start going to more meetings under his direction. I start meeting with him after our home group because I get Carry Young People as my home group. We start reading the book, and I feel a little bit different because at least I've found a place that I have an outlet, like I can vent. So basically, when I meet Gary, there's 15 minutes about me complaining about my life and bitching about everything. And then he says, well, you know what? Let's just read the book. Let's see what the book has to tell us what to do. And inevitably, every time when we read from the book, as we read the first 164 pages, there's something that pertains to my exact mental screwed up predicament that makes sense, that says something to me, that tells me that it's going to be okay, that it's going to get a little bit better, and we just keep reading. He reads a page, I read a page, and that's how that whole process works for a while. I get obsessed with the idea that AA won't work for me. I don't know, for some reason I kept looking at it and I kept thinking there's no way just doing these real simple things and doing these 12 steps is going to change me. And so I do it out of reluctance, but I continue to ask questions about, well, what does it mean to do the third step? And he's like, we haven't even done the second step, And I just realized that, I'm still dissecting my life, and I'm still dissecting what's wrong with me. And I really haven't even done the first step properly. It really didn't happen until after I met Gary a couple of times, that I was mowing my lawn, and I was convinced that maybe I didn't need to go to A anymore. Maybe I'd overthought this getting a sponsor thing, and I don't really need to do it. She seems a little bit calmer in the house. Things are getting a little bit better, I'll put some mixtapes moves on her and get her back to being happy with me, and then I'll be back in the big boy bed, and things will be okay. And that's all I really needed to get done anyways. I got a job. It'll be okay. But I come to grips with the second part of step one, which is my life's unmanageable. Because powerless over alcohol isn't too hard of a concept for me to agree to. Because I realized from that last time I drank, I can't have one. I've never had one. From when I was 15 to 37, I've never had one drink. And any night that I ever resolved to only drink 2 beers was the worst 2-beer night of my life. And the only thing I looked forward to on a 2-beer party was the ability to get back to my place so I could drink as much as I needed to, which is what I did every single time. So even if I was going to some place and I was like, I only have 2 beers, I did not have only 2 beers that night. It was just only 2 beers with that group of people because I didn't want to hear them judging me. But what I realized while I'm mowing my lawn is the unmanageability of life is that my marriage is on the rocks. My job's in jeopardy because I'm miserable and angry. I have no money, so I have no financial freedom whatsoever. And then I realized that I've never been in the back of a cop car sober. The only time I've ever been to jail sober was to serve time for a DUI. That no matter how many times I've dried out, because I've had dry periods, nothing was ever okay. I never felt okay mentally, physically. All those things were wrong. And that's when I come to grips with step one, which is that the unmanageability of life goes beyond just physical circumstance. It goes into that, how my mental well-being is even in the absence of alcohol. The absence of alcohol, that's what step one is. Step one is really hopelessness. I think Page talks about that, where he says step one is hopeless. That's why you got to get a man to step 3 as soon as you can, because 3 is asking God to help you and believing God will, so that's the restoration of hope. So I stole that from Page, by the way. It's not mine, my stuff. So I realized that that's the case for me. And Gary and I begin to work the steps. I get a nickname called Dr. Riggs because I'm always trying to figure out how things are going to work before I'm willing to do any of them. We get to step 4, and I have a hard time with step 4 because he makes me put Debbie down, who's my biological mother, and I'm like, well, I resent her, but there's no part in it. I was like, she did this to me. I didn't ask her to leave. I didn't make her disappear. I didn't make her not call me. I didn't make her not do. And I don't call her Debbie, by the way. I call her the B word. I don't even call her by her name, because my stepmother stepped up to be my mom. So that was my mom in my mind, because she had acted like one. And Gary was like, no, your part in it will be different. He said, we'll get there. And so what I realized through the power of the fourth step and really doing a fifth step with Gary was that there was a part in it. That everything that I resented in my life, I had some part in it. And what I had in the part was what I kind of already told you guys was I used that as a weapon. I used it against my stepmom, who I called mom, to make her angry. I used it with every woman that I came into contact with to get what I wanted from them. I used it with anybody else in my family to make them feel sorry for me. And that's where my part was in it. Like that I needed to get rid of it because it was the baggage that I was dragging around. It was the cross that I was bearing that I didn't need to bear anymore. And then there's with all other resentments. Whether it's with my family, they're not trying to control me. Turns out my family just wants me to be sober and stop being a liar. Like that's all they really want. They don't care if I have a job. They don't care where I live. They don't care if I pick my nose and eat it. They don't care what clothes I wear. The actual only thing that my father and my mother only wanted from me was just don't drink and do drugs and stop lying to us. That's the only thing they ever wanted from me. I didn't find that out until I made amends to them. And my mom, when I was making amends to her, she was like, you're sober. She was like, that's all I ever wanted. She was like, everything else is up to you. Just do it. She was like, just keep doing what you're doing. It's working. You know, I make amends to my in-laws. When I make amends to my in-laws, I find out that the reason why Ryan stopped looking for an apartment was JoJo, my mother-in-law, saw that I was trying. And so she told Ryan, as long as he's trying, you got to wait. And she says, and I could see it's different now. She was like, you smile with your eyes. And I said, what do you mean? She was like, you used to smile, but it was fake. I knew that you weren't happy. Like, you would just smile because that's the situation that you were in. She was like, when you're happy now, I can tell that you're actually happy. Like, it's an inside happiness. And she was right. Like, after having worked and gotten to step 9 where I was out making amends, I actually had inner peace. Like, I had it when I finished doing my 5th step with Gary. We did 5, and we did 6 and 7, and I was driving home that night. And I remember driving by myself, and I remember smiling in the car, and I didn't recognize the feeling for a minute, and then I would realize that, like, I was okay, and I was alone. Normally, when I'm in my car by myself, that's, like, woe is me time, like, oh, this sucks, and she's probably still going to leave me, and the job is crap, and I got a college education, and it doesn't even get me a good job, and this is wrong, and this is wrong, and I wasn't thinking about any of those things. Like, AA had started to give me a freedom. A mental freedom that I had never had before. Like a freedom from my own bondage of self, like it talks about. Like I'd gotten little glimpses of that. Through making amends with people in my family, traveling back to Michigan to make amends with them, like I get more freedom. Because I've at least tried to make wrong what I did right. I've at least owned up to everything that I've done with all these people. They don't necessarily completely forgive me right away. Those family relationships take years still to get better. But the principal crux of the problem is gone, which is me in those relationships. My dad doesn't fall in love with me all over again and we go out and hang out together. But I do have an ability to talk to him. I have an ability to go and visit people, visit my family, and not leave angry and guilty, because at least we're able to communicate to each other in an honest fashion. Because at least when I tell them what I'm doing and I tell them where I've been, I've actually been there and I've actually done what I say I'm going to do. You know, I was almost a year sober. 10 months. I was 10 months sober, standing outside of the TAC, and I was talking to Michael Scott, who's now my sponsor today, but I was talking to him, and I was whining about Ryan and how Ryan's not this and she doesn't love me and I think she's still going to leave me and it's getting bad and it's not getting any better and I've been sober for 10 months and I don't understand. And the conversation goes for a while. It's really cold like tonight. And he says, man, he was like, have you ever done anything for her just because you love her? I said, what do you mean? He was just to not get anything in return. And I had to pause and I had to realize that I hadn't. And it made me really sad. Because I had realized that even being sober, I hadn't changed my behavior in my house. Like, I was always doing something to get something from her. I was always projecting an image, doing this thing so she would do what I wanted her to do. And it was like a really sad moment for me. I got home and I was going to talk to her, and she was like, I need to talk to you. She said, I think we need to start moving forward. And I was like, really? She was like, yeah. She's like, I think it's been long enough. I can tell you're trying. I think we start moving forward. So it was almost a year sober before anything really changed at home. Yeah. And I had made amends to her, by the way. Keep in mind, I had made amends to her about a month or two before that. So making amends doesn't fix anything. It just cleans up my side of the street. That doesn't change how people are going to treat me. It just changes how I can feel about that relationship and how I know that I've done what I can do. So it does start to change, man. And I've been, I could tell you, like, today, what it looks like is it doesn't look much different than when I first showed up. I got a home group. I don't skip it. Rain, sleet, or snow, we meet in the parking lot. I go. I sponsor other men. I still keep in contact with my sponsor. Like, I don't disappear. Prayer life and spiritual growth is something that I've gotten, what's the word I would look for? I've become more reliant upon it. More and more reliant upon God than I probably was in the first year of sobriety, as the longer I've been sober. Seeking out spiritual growth on my own has been something that I find is vital. And I realize that there's a part of the book, there's only a few times where the book talks about purpose, but there is, after step 10, it says your primary purpose now is to grow closer to God and to help others. So when I sponsor men and I talk to them, I was like, you're going to be left with two things. Get closer to God and go help people. And go help people might be your mom, it might be your neighbor, might be your boss, or when you go to work you actually do your job. Or it might be an AA, where you actually got to go help a newcomer, or you might have to help a woman who needs help with something too. So it doesn't mean that you avoid, you help. I was like, so that's what I've learned. For me, that growing closer to God is something that I have to do on my own. As much as I do it in the community of AA, where we pray and we do all these things together, there's a lot of what I do on my own, where reading, praying, going to church, by the way, and not having a whole bunch of objections. I can actually go to church. I realize that most of my objections to church are just of my own making, and they're really my problem, and that 99% of the people in church are just like the people in AA. They're just people that are trying to get better at living life. And AA, at church, I experienced some things where my pastor talked about Alcoholics Anonymous for numerous times. He talked about it so many times it was weird. It was bizarre. I was like, why is this guy always talking about AA? And I just realized that because he was talking about the genuine help in AA. I actually meet with my pastor one-on-one for a while to get some counseling on how to handle my marriage conduct, to how to handle a lot of other things in my life. So I actually end up meeting with a pastor one-on-one. Maybe I'll leave you with this last thought because I don't want to talk forever. Just one last thing that I remember experiencing was I was going to church and having a hard time with it and not able to listen. And I called Gary and I said, man, this church thing ain't working, dude. I know you told me to go. It was working for a while, but man, I'm going and I'm just angry. I was like, it's just ticking me off. It's taking my Sunday time away. I just want to sleep in. And he was like, you need to pray to be a loving listener. I said, what? He was like, you need to pray to be a loving listener. He's like, so when you get to church, he goes, go up to the diet. I was like, no, we're not a Catholic church. You don't go up to that. He was like, all right, well, when you get to church, he says, you sit down. He goes, pray again to be a loving listener. I said, fine, I'll do it. So I go to church, shake hands. Everybody says hi. I sit down. Usually before church service starts is I read the news. Why would you read the news in church? But that's what I would normally do, which is a good way to get your blood boiling, right, is to read the news that you don't agree with, and that way you can then somehow hear God talk to you because you're going to be blood boiling. So I don't do that. I keep my phone in my pocket, and I say, all right, God, you got to help me be a loving listener, because if not, I'm not coming back here anymore, but I'll be a loving listener, so help me be a loving listener. Pastor comes up, and it's about the presence of God, and how do you find and feel the presence of God. And he says, like it can be done through service work. You work in a soup kitchen. That's genuinely helping people. That's the presence of God. He says you can find it through prayer and meditation on one's own. When you pray by yourself, you can feel the presence of God, which has happened to me. So I start to listen to him, actually, and it starts to identify, because I realize, well, in AA, I'm a service. Yeah, so I feel the presence of God then. I was like, yeah, and I prayed. I felt God, with me. I felt God come in and just calm down. I mean, I've legitimately prayed on my knees in the Walmart bathroom as a manager because I just hated the job so much. And then he says, the last thing he tells me, he says, there's one place, he goes, and he says that God is definitely there. He says it's at the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. He says, because in a meeting of AA, those people have no vested interest other than helping keep each other sober. He was like, they don't even all agree on anything else. But they agree on one thing. Let's find a way to get sober, and let's help each other get sober. He goes, that's where God's at. He goes, because God is right there. Because that's the one thing they're trying to do, and it brings them all together. And so I was like, man, I'm really glad I listened today. Instead of sneaking reading my phone. So I guess I say that God is always there. It's just when I'm willing to listen. It's when I'm willing to slow down that I find him. And that for me, the toughest times in AA are better than anything I've ever had before Alcoholics Anonymous. So, with that, I'm done.
All right.